Study section 11. Reconstructing History. Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Introduction. The world literary scene, and specifically East Africa, could not undermine the dexterity of Ngugi wa Thiong'o. In this vein, we shall take a look at his personage and his dramaturgy, how his ideology and vision drives home the issue of reconstructing Kenyan history. Objective. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to relate Ngugi ideology to the background I'm playing. Content. Ngugi wa Thiong'o was born James N. Ngugi on 5th January 1938 at Kamiritu, Limuru in Kianibu district in central Kenya. Ngugi was the fifth of his mother's 6 children. Ngugi's family was involved in the reprising of that period, that is, the Mawu Mawu. His brother, Wallace Nwangi, was a guerrilla for several years. And because of her son's involvement in the struggle, Wanjiku was once arrested and tortured by the authorities. One of his stepbrothers, who was deaf and mute, was shot by Home Guard soldiers. Black Kenyans who served the settler government as a militia and counter-insurgent entity when it did not hear their orders to stop. Ngugi has described events such as that of my cousin, Gushinin wa Ngugi, just escaping the hangman's rope because he had been caught with live bullets. Uncles and other villages murdered because they had taken the oath. 1976, page 12. Oath is a portion of the Gikuyu male initiation ceremony that was adopted by that early fighters of the land and Freedom Army as a pledge to honor Gikuyu customs and to defend them in the face of outside enemies. Colonial officials felt this oath was a kind of magical binding to savagery and tried to get captives forced to admit having taken the oath and then to renounce it. This period was formative for Ngugi in many ways. He was reaching unprecedented heights in his educational pursuits, since few people from Limuru has made it so far through the colonial system. But at the same time, his people were directly engaged in a bloody anti-colonial struggle. In an article of a schoolboy reading of the adventure series featuring Bigos, a dashing young British pilot, Ngugi emphasizes the strange reality of this period in his life. In reading Bigos in the years 1955 and 1956, I was involved in a drama of contradictions. Bingos, the flying R and squadron leader of the Royal Air Force, could have been dropping bombs on my own brother in the forest of Mount Kenya. He would have been pitted against my own brother, who, amidst all the fighting in the forest, still found time to send messages to me to cling to education no matter what happened to him. In the forest, they, who were so imbued with Kenyan nationalist patriotism, had celebrated my being accepted in the same school where I was to meet Bingos and imaginary characters so imbued with a sense of British patriotism. 1993, 138. The exploration of these ideals informed many of Ngugi's earlier works, and the rejection, perhaps the repudiation of such ideas, spoils his later critical and literary efforts. At Alliance High School, Ngugi continued his unbound reading of European writers that began in primary school. The Kenya colonial school system followed the model of other British colonies using popular and canonical literary works to bolster the image and culture of the empire, thereby building good citizens and creating colonized subjects. In his late 1960s writings, Ngugi reflected on his early education with some bitterness. Scholars of his writing and ideas tend to point to the period as marking a change in his philosophy. Ngugi indeed felt he had somehow not done enough for the nationalist cause during the emergency afterward. In one of Ngugi's school experience, one of my earliest experiences at that school in 1955 was taking part in a debate on a motion that Western education has done more harm than good. Although I was new in the school, I remember quite vividly standing up and trembling with anger and saying that Western education could not be equated with the land taken from the peasant by the British. And I remember holding up a fountain pen and giving the example of someone who comes and take away food from your mouth and then give you a fountain pen instead. I asked the audience, can you eat a fountain pen? Can you clothe yourself with a fountain pen or shelter yourself with it? 1987, page 20. The portrait of the elite school, its activities linked to both the intellect and religion, is a clear reflection of the colonial era as well as the British education system of the time. All these experiences nurtured the creative dexterity of Ngugi as an accomplished playwright, as exemplified in the trial of Denda Kimati, 1976. In Ngugi and Marcel, the trial of Denda Kimati, 1976, an insight into contemporary Kenya politics is to come face to face with the issue and abuses to which the African ruling classes have subjected history. For at the heart of the conflictual essence of Kenya's politics is the assessment of the authentic version of Kenya history in the pre-colonial and colonial periods. Whilst imperialist interests have been installed as a result of their domination of vital media outlets, have insisted on the colonialist, supremacist viewpoint of Kenya history. The ruling government has authenticated this deceitful position by deliberately undermining those aspects of the nationalist history that involve the masses, especially the Mau Mau guerrilla heroes. In a patriotic bid to confront, overtake, and transcend these misinterpretations, Kenya intellectuals have insisted on seeing the emergence of modern Kenyan nationalism in the Mau Mau and other anti-colonial struggles waged by the Kenya peasants and workers. According to the authors, Ngugi and Marcel, the play is an imaginative recreation and interpretation of the collective will of the Kenya peasants and workers in their refusal to break under 60 years of colonial torture and ruthless oppression by the British ruling classes, and their continued determination to resist exploitation, oppression, and new forms of enslavement. 1976, page 4. A larger part of the project, according to Amuta, is the rehabilitation of heroic figures who have suffered denigration and vilification in the hands of colonialist and imperialist historian writers. In the play, the figure of Kimati leaders of the Mau Mau struggle is enlarged and ideologically maneuvered to symbolize the present struggle of Kenya workers and peasants against imperialism and its local collaborators. The play centered on the actual trial of Kimati in 1956 by the British authorities. The trial of Denda Kimati becomes a metaphor of the history of struggle among African peoples in the past and present. In the same vein, envisioning a future of triumph for patriotic and progressive forces. The laying a plot of the play is provided by the preparations to try Kimati, the actual trial, futile rescue mission, and a last suggestion of his dastardly and timid execution. Ngugi's commitment to the emancipation of his people is central and dominant in the play. He, with his co-author Mansa, states in the preface to the play, Kimati and women represent the voices of Ngugi, and Mansa in the play, determined, fearless, and focused. When Kimati is taken to court the second time, having refused to talk the first time, the following conversation ensued between him and the trial judge. Judge, in bracket, after reading the charge, guilty or not guilty? Kimati, by what right dare you, a colonial judge, sit in judgment over me? Judge, Kimati, I may remind you that we are in a court of law. Kimati, an imperialist court of law. Judge, I may remind you that you are charged with a most serious crime. It carries a death sentence. Kimati, death? Judge, yes, death. Kimati, to a criminal judge in a criminal court set up by criminal law, the law of oppression, I have no words. 1976, page 25. The same fearless spirit is found with woman as she declares to boy, let 1,000 bullets be shot through our heads, but this I believe, one day the soil will be restored to the people. Our land shall one day be truly ours. 1976, page 21. As a committed Marxist, Ngugi believes that change can only come through struggle and even violence. He tells us again through Kimati that I despise your law and your court. What have they done for our people? What? I recognize only one law, one court, the court and the law of those who fight against exploitation. That is the internal law of the oppressed. Fight, struggle, change. Under imperialism, justice is created through a revolutionary struggle. Our struggles must therefore continue. 1976-26. This play is one of such bold efforts at historical deconstruction of existing chronicles on the liberation struggles of the Kenya people against British imperialism in the pre-independence Kenya. According to Da Silva, the play plays a significant role in the presentation of the colonial Kenya. No doubt, one perceives a hybrid of influence of Marxist ideology, as well as the typical of African philosophical hermeneutics on the carefully constructed dramatic form or structure of the play. It is in this regards that form serves as a decoder and mirror of meaning. 2004, page 75. From the foregoing, we therefore now see how Ngugi as a playwright is also an ideologue and how he has brought very strongly his ideology, Marxism, and vision into his play. The effect of the rounded artistic vision of Ngugi and Mugo becomes evident in the terse, incisive style, the mythic structure, and the sophisticated coordination of the three movements in the play, all of which help to lead the action briskly and inevitably to a climax. At the same time, they help to indicate both playwrights' complex but rich imagination as well as their deep insight into individual and social psychology. To this end, Kimati, the central figure in the play, is deliberately and consciously juxtaposed between his physical essence and what he actually symbolizes, the moving spirit of a most resilient people. Femi Oshofisan, 1987, page 7. Like his curators, Ngugi and Mugo, Kimati is of the conviction that the society is changeable and that the problems of his compatriots can be overcome through unwavering determination and in particular by armed resistance against British imperialism, external, and the domestic agents, internal. This is born out of the idea of building a virile and egalitarian society. In the preface to the play, it is noted that Kimati never fought in that war. Rather, he involved his brilliant guerrilla tactics and his enormous organizing capacity from the needs of the struggle. In the words of Da Silva, Kimati in the play transcends his physical limitations. He assumed the position of the ideal revolutionary whose omnipresent spirit in the philosophical realm is similar to Caesarism in William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Just as Caesarism equips the friends of Caesar with strong and determined optimism, at the same time, disarms the conspirators of their initial courage, haunts them with predictable failure and inevitable tragic end. 2004, page 76. In the same vein, Kimatism as a philosophy arms Denda Kimati's co-fighters with a strong and determined optimism. It sends deadly fears down the spine of the enemy of the people, the British imperialists and their local collaborator. The trial shows the imperialists' desperation to annihilate the physical Kimata. What the imperialist fails to realize is that should Kimati be physically destroyed, as is the case with Julius Caesar, the spirit of the revolution shall be kept alive till victory is achieved by those in the liberation struggles. To the imperialist imagination, every woman, every child is a Mau Mau terrorist. The atmosphere of the play is so charged that the woman in the play had to hide a pistol in a loaf of bread. In the bid to recreate and remold the character of Kimati, Ngugi and Mugo portrayed him as a superhuman who could do exploits. Girl, I myself do not believe it. Kimati would have known. Boy, I have also heard he could turn himself into an aeroplane. Girl, that he could walk for a long 100 miles on his belly. Boy, he could laugh and no enemy would hear him. Girl, that he could mimic the voice of birds. Boy, how then could they arrest him? Basically, the trial of Denda Kimati, 1976, is rooted in the Marxist ideology, which builds around class struggle, specifically the imperialists and the poor as represented in the Kenyan society. Kimati as a character represents the masses. Summary: Ngugi wa Thiong'o's commitment to the emancipation of his people is central and dominant in his play. The trial of Denda Kimati, 1976. The play is an imaginative recreation and interpretation of the collective will of the Kenyan peasants under 60 years of colonial torture and ruthless oppression. End of study section 11. Thanks for listening.